For 20 years, my world was contained in the gentle, ever-present hum of a climate-controlled server room. My name is Frank Miller, and I was the senior systems architect for Viridian Dynamics, one of the largest retail conglomerates in the country. That title is a bit of a misnomer. In reality, I was more like a digital blacksmith. 20 years ago, when Viridian was just a fraction of its current size, I hammered out the code for our first proprietary financial transaction system. I called it the Bastion. It wasn't flashy. It didn't have a slick user interface or a trendy name, but it was a fortress. It was fast, secure, and above all, flawlessly reliable. For 2 decades, every single dollar that flowed through Viridian from online sales, from point-of-sale systems in over 1,000 stores, from vendor payments and payroll passed through the digital fortress I had built and maintained. The Bastion was my life's work. It had processed trillions of dollars without a single catastrophic failure. I knew its every quirk, every line of its millions of lines of code, like a priest knows his scripture. I was the one they called at 3 a.m. on Christmas Eve, when a minor glitch occurred. I was the one who put in 72-hour shifts during system migrations. I didn't have a fancy office on the executive floor. I had a cluttered, windowless room next to the servers, filled with old manuals, spare hard drives, and the lingering scent of ozone. And that was just fine by me. My value wasn't in schmoozing with vice presidents. It was in the silent, perfect execution of my system. I was the foundation of the castle, unseen and unglamorous, but utterly essential, or so I thought. The first tremor of my impending doom arrived in the form of a man named Dexter Holloway. Dex was the new COO, a private equity shark brought in to optimize and streamline. He was in his late 30s, with a jawline that looked like it was carved from granite, teeth so white they were practically a hazard, and a wardrobe of impeccably tailored suits that probably cost more than my car. He walked through the halls with the predatory grace of a panther, and his vocabulary consisted almost entirely of words like synergy, disruption, and right-sizing. He saw Viridian not as a company, but as an asset sheet. People, to him, were either assets or liabilities. There was no in-between. Our first meeting was a mandatory departmental review. He strode into my office, looked at my aging servers and mismatched monitors with a barely concealed sneer, and got straight to the point. "Frank," he said, not sitting down, "I have been looking at your department's PLD. Your salary is one of the highest in the IT division. And this legacy system, it's a black box. My team can't get any modern analytics out of it. Why are we still running this relic instead of migrating to a cloud-based, off-the-shelf solution?" I tried to explain. I told him that the Bastion's closed-loop architecture was its greatest strength, making it virtually impenetrable to external threats. I explained that its raw processing speed for simple transactions was still faster than any cloud service on the market, which was critical during peak holiday seasons. I told him that its so-called black box nature was a security feature, not a bug. "I can get you any data you need, Dex," I said calmly. "You just have to ask me. The system is complex, but I know it better than I know my own name." He wasn't listening. His eyes were glazed over. I was speaking a language of substance and stability. He only understood the language of cost and optics. "Right," he said, cutting me off. "Look, we're bringing in a new team. Agile, young, hungry. They're experts in modernizing infrastructure. I'll need you to cooperate with them. Help them understand the architecture of this thing." He said the word architecture like he was holding something distasteful. The new team arrived a week later. They were exactly what I expected. A trio of guys in their 20s, all wearing hoodies and expensive sneakers, who called each other bro and talked about crushing code. They looked at my system with the kind of disdain only the young and ignorant can muster. They saw my meticulously crafted C and assembly code as ancient runes. They wanted APIS, Python libraries, and dashboards. They didn't understand the concept of building something to last for decades. They were used to building apps that lasted for a few years before being replaced. I tried to teach them. I really did. I spent weeks walking them through the core modules, explaining the fail-safes, the redundancy protocols, the unique logic I had built to handle the immense load of Black Friday. They would nod along, but their eyes were always on their phones. They saw me as a dinosaur they had to humor before they could tear down my museum and build their shiny theme park. Dex, of course, loved them. He saw them as a reflection of himself. New, fast, and cheap. The inevitable came on a Tuesday in late October, about 5 weeks before Black Friday. I was called into a sterile, glass-walled conference room on the executive floor. Dex was there, along with a woman from Human Resources I'd never seen before. She had a tight, professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Frank," Dex began, leaning back in his chair with a magnanimous air. "As you know, Viridian is moving in a bold new direction. We're embracing the future, and that requires some tough decisions. We're officially decommissioning the Bastion system at the end of the next fiscal year and migrating to a new cloud-based platform." The HR woman slid a folder across the table towards me. "Your position as senior systems architect is being made redundant, effective immediately," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion. I opened the folder. Inside was a severance agreement. For my 20 years of service, of loyalty, of middle-of-the-night emergency calls and holidays spent in a server room, they were offering me 3 months' pay. It was a slap in the face, a calculated, insulting, brutal slap in the face. "You can't just decommission the Bastion," I stammered, my voice sounding distant. "It's tied into everything. It'll take years to migrate safely. And Black Friday, you can't handle Black Friday without it. The new team doesn't understand its load balancing protocols." Dex held up a hand. "Frank, please, don't make this difficult. The new team is more than capable. They've assured me they have everything under control. We think it's best for all parties if we make a clean break. Today is your last day." That was it. 20 years, gone in 20 minutes. I was escorted back to my office by a security guard, who stood there impassively as I packed my personal belongings into a cardboard box. My coffee mug, a picture of my late wife, a small framed award for service excellence I'd received in 2005. The new team, the 3 young guys, walked past my door as I was packing. They didn't look at me. They just kept walking, laughing about some meme on their phones. They were already moving into my kingdom. I was led out of the building like a criminal, my box in my arms. As I stood in the parking lot, watching the gleaming glass tower of Viridian Dynamics reflect the autumn sun, the shock began to wear off, replaced by a deep, cold, and unfamiliar feeling. It was rage. The first few weeks were a blur of lawyers, unemployment forms, and aimless days spent staring at the television. I watched as Viridian's PR machine went into overdrive. Dex was featured in a major business magazine, hailed as a visionary CEO. He talked about his new dynamic IT strategy and how he had cut the fat and removed legacy bottlenecks to prepare the company for its biggest holiday season ever. He never mentioned my name. It was as if I, and my 2 decades of work, had never existed. They were erasing me. And then one rainy afternoon, as I was going through old files on my home computer, I found it. A document I had created for my own personal use years ago. It was a maintenance guide for the Bastion's most critical and most secret subsystem. I called it the Spillover Protocol. The Bastion was built for speed. During periods of extreme transaction volume, like the 12-hour peak on Black Friday, the system would automatically offload raw transaction data to a temporary, heavily encrypted storage partition. This prevented the main processing queue from ever getting clogged, ensuring near instantaneous transaction approvals. It was the secret to how the Bastion could handle 10,000 transactions per second, while its competitors choked on a tenth of that. But this partition, the spillover cache, had a finite capacity. It was designed to hold about 12 hours of peak holiday traffic. Once it was full, the system was designed to do one thing to prevent data corruption. It would stop accepting new transactions. Cold. Yeah, it wouldn't crash. It wouldn't send up an error flare. It would simply, silently, refuse to process another payment until the cache was manually purged and its data reintegrated with the main ledger. This purge process was my secret ritual. It was a complex 20-step sequence that required a unique 256-bit cryptographic key. Dat. For security, I was the only one who knew the full sequence, and I changed the key every quarter. I had performed this ritual 4 times a year, every year, for 2 decades. It was my job security, the one piece of knowledge I had never fully documented, the one key to the kingdom I had never handed over. The new team, in their arrogance, had likely run their scans and seen a stable system with massive amounts of free processing power. They would have no idea that they were looking at a ticking time bomb. They wouldn't know the spillover cache existed. They wouldn't know about the purge protocol. And they certainly wouldn't know the new cryptographic key I had set in early October, just before Dex had called me into that room. They were flying the most powerful jet in the world, believing it ran on an infinite source of fuel. They had no idea that in the middle of their most important flight, on the busiest day of the year, the engines were simply going to shut off. I leaned back in my chair, the document glowing on my screen. I had a choice. I could be the professional, the good man I had always been. I could pick up the phone, warn them of the catastrophe that was about to unfold, and maybe, just maybe, they'd offer me a ludicrously expensive consulting fee to come in and save them. Or I could do nothing. I could sit back, pour myself a drink, and watch as 20 years of being taken for granted, of being dismissed and discarded, came home to roost. I could let them fail. I pulled up a calendar on my screen. I stared at the date for Friday, November 29th, Black Friday, the day the castle walls would be tested, the day the foundation I had laid would be the very thing that brought it all crumbling down. A slow smile spread across my face. It felt cold, alien, but also deeply satisfying. I closed the calendar. My decision was made. All I had to do now was wait. The weeks that followed my termination were a study in surreal tranquility. While Viridian Dynamics ramped up its holiday marketing blitz, I settled into a new routine. I set up what I called my war room in my spare bedroom. One monitor was permanently tuned to the financial news networks. Another displayed Viridian's stock ticker. A third was dedicated to a live feed of social media mentions of the company. I was a ghost watching his old house, waiting for the new tenants to discover the fatal flaw in the foundation. Every day I'd see a new article quoting Dex Holloway. He was a media darling. He spoke of disruptive innovation and boasted about how his newly agile infrastructure was more than ready for the Black Friday surge. In one interview, he specifically mentioned that they had cleared out the old, rigid systems and the thinking that went with them. He was talking about me. Every quote, every smug photo was another log on the fire of my cold, patient anger. Thanksgiving Day arrived. For the first time in 20 years, my phone was silent. There were no last-minute panics, no calls to triple-check the server load balancers. I had a quiet dinner, just me and a plate of turkey, and watched a football game. I thought about all the Thanksgiving dinners I'd cut short, all the family time I'd sacrificed to make sure the company I served was ready for its biggest day. I had given them my life, and they had given me a cardboard box. Tonight, for the first time, I felt a sense of peace. It was the deep, calm peace of a man who knows a great reckoning is coming, and that he does not have to lift a single finger to make it happen. Black Friday began at midnight. I was awake, coffee in hand, watching the monitors. The initial reports were glowing. Viridian shatters online sales records in first hour. One headline blared. Social media was a torrent of happy customers. The stock was ticking upwards in pre-market trading. I watched the transaction data, the numbers climbing at a dizzying rate. I could almost feel the Bastion's engines roaring to life, handling the load effortlessly, just as I designed it to. And I could feel the spillover cache, my secret time bomb, steadily filling up. I made a pot of coffee and settled in. It was going to be a long day. The first sign of trouble appeared at 11:47 a.m. Eastern Time, the peak of the morning rush. It was a single tweet. "Hey Viridian, trying to buy the new Xbox, but your site won't process my payment. What gives? Black Friday fail." Then came another, and another. View. Within 10 minutes, it was a flood. The hashtag #ViridianDown started trending. The happy post turned to a cacophony of digital rage. On the news, a business reporter was looking at her monitor with a confused expression. "We are getting reports of widespread outages on Viridian's e-commerce platform," she said. "Their stock, which was up 5% this morning, has just, well, it's plummeting. I knew exactly what was happening inside their headquarters. Dex and his team of wonderkins would be in full-blown panic. They'd be looking at their system dashboards, which would be showing all green lights. The Bastion wasn't down. It hadn't crashed. It was running perfectly. It had simply, quietly, and obediently followed its core programming. Cache full. Transaction processing halted. They would be searching for a ghost, a phantom error that didn't exist, while every minute, millions of dollars in sales vanished into thin air. I imagined Dex's handsome, confident face turning pale, the sweat beading on his brow as he realized his agile modern team was completely, utterly useless. My phone rang at 1:12 p.m. It was a private number. I let it ring, savoring the sound. On the fifth ring, I picked it up and said nothing. "Frank?" The voice was strained, breathless. It was Dex. "Frank, thank God. We have a problem. A big one." I let the silence hang for a moment before replying, my voice calm and even. "That's a shame, Dex. I'm sorry to hear that. As you know, I'm retired now. I was just about to do some gardening." "Gardening?" "One." "Frank, don't play games with me," he shrieked, the mask of corporate composure shattering. "The whole system is down. We're losing millions a minute. My guys can't figure it out. They say it's your old system. You have to help us." "My system?" I said, feigning surprise. "But I thought you decommissioned that relic. I thought your new team had everything under control." "That's what you said in that magazine article, wasn't it?" He was quiet for a second. I could hear frantic shouting in the background. "Okay, Frank. Okay, you win," he said, his voice dropping to a desperate rasp. "What do you want? Name your price." "Anything." This was the moment, the culmination of 20 years of loyalty and 5 weeks of rage. I took a slow sip of my coffee. "All right, Dex, here's what's going to happen. You will listen, and you will not interrupt. First, you will go to your finance department and authorize an immediate wire transfer to my personal account. We'll call it a reactivation fee. The amount will be my former annual salary. The full amount. I want a confirmation from my bank that the transfer is complete before we continue this conversation." I could hear him sputtering. "That's insane. I can't authorize. You are losing millions every minute, Dex." I cut him off, my voice turning to ice. "My price is not negotiable. That's the first term. The second term is my new employment contract. It will be for a period of 10 years. My title will be Chief Systems Architect. My salary will be double my previous one, with a guaranteed annual bonus. I will report directly to the CEO, not to you. Your authority over my division will be zero. That contract will be drawn up by your legal team and emailed to my lawyer within the hour." There was a long, choked silence. "And the third term," I continued, twisting the knife, "is the most important. You, personally, will draft a press release. It will be sent out on all company channels. In it, you will state that today's catastrophic failure was a direct result of a strategic misstep in personnel restructuring and a failure to appreciate legacy system knowledge. It will state that the company has retained the services of Mr. Frank Miller to rectify the situation. You will sign your name to it, Dex. I want your apology to be as public as your arrogance was." He was breathing heavily now. I knew the board, the CEO. They were all in that room with him, listening on speakerphone, their empire burning down around them. They had no choice. "Fine," he whispered, his voice cracking with defeat. "Fine. We agree to all terms." Less than an hour later, my phone buzzed with a notification from my bank. The money was there. A few minutes after that, a draft of the employment contract arrived in my lawyer's inbox. And then, I saw it on the news ticker. Viridian Suo Dex Holloway, issue statement. I read the words. My words, broadcast for the entire world to see. My public vindication. Only then did I call them back. I had Dex stay on the line. I made him listen as I calmly, methodically, walked one of his terrified young engineers through the 20-step spillover protocol. At the very end, I gave them the cryptographic key. "Execute," I said. There was a pause, and then I heard a cheer erupt in the background. On my monitor, the social media feed changed instantly. "It's working again." My payment went through. The floodgates had reopened. 6 months later, I'm sitting in a new office. It's on the executive floor. It's twice the size of my old one, and it has a floor-to-ceiling window with a view of the entire city. My title is Chief Systems Architect, and people in the hallway address me as Mr. Miller Carty. I work 30 hours a week, and my primary role is to mentor a new team of hand-picked engineers, teaching them the value of building things to last. The Bastion is still the heart of the company, but we are planning its successor, now a 5-year project. Done right. Dex Holloway was fired the Monday after Black Friday. His golden boy reputation was incinerated by the press release he was forced to sign. He became a pariah, a case study in business schools of how arrogance can destroy value. My revenge was never about the money, though the financial security is nice. It was about respect. It was about proving that the foundations are more important than the fancy facade. They thought I was a relic, a part of the past. They learned the hard way that the past has a way of reaching out and switching off your future. I didn't have to plant a bomb. I didn't have to hack their system. I just let the truth of the system I built play out. I let it do its job. And in doing so, the fortress I constructed to protect the company ended up protecting its creator.